Donald Trump Jr. thought he could publicly humiliate Jasmine Crockett at a charity gala with crude insults and intimidation tactics. What happened next got him physically removed by security and banned from every major venue in Manhattan. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers as Manhattan's elite gathered for the annual Children's Cancer Research Foundation Gala, a black tie event that typically raised over $15 million for pediatric oncology programs. The evening was supposed to be about unity, putting politics aside for a cause everyone could support. Tables worth $50,000 each filled the ornate space occupied by celebrities, business leaders, politicians from both parties, and philanthropists who'd written seven-figure checks. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat at table 12 with a bipartisan group of lawmakers who'd co-sponsored childhood cancer legislation. She wore an elegant navy gown and had flown in from Dallas specifically for this event, not because she enjoyed Manhattan galas, but because the foundation had honored her work on expanding federal funding for pediatric research. Her presence was meant to highlight how policy and philanthropy could work together. Donald Trump Jr. sat 3 tables away, surrounded by real estate executives and social media influencers who treated him like visiting royalty. He'd paid $100,000 for his table, not out of charitable impulse, but because these events were where deals got made and political alliances were forged. He'd been drinking steadily since the cocktail hour, his voice getting louder with each glass of champagne, his comments becoming increasingly inappropriate for a children's charity event. The trouble started during the silent auction. Crockett had bid on a week-long medical mission trip to Guatemala, something she genuinely wanted to participate in. When the auctioneer announced her winning bid of $25,000, polite applause rippled through the ballroom. But from Trump Jr.'s table came a different sound. Loud, mocking laughter followed by a comment that carried across the room. 25 grand to play doctor in Guatemala. I guess that's what passes for foreign policy experience in the Democratic Party now. Several people at nearby tables turned to look, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to disgust. This was supposed to be a nonpartisan evening focused on sick children, not a venue for political attacks. Crockett heard the comment but didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that engaging with hecklers at formal events only escalated situations and took attention away from the cause at hand. She simply smiled and continued her conversation with the pediatric oncologist sitting next to her. But Trump Jr. wasn't finished. Emboldened by the laughter from his table, and apparently unaware of how his voice was carrying, he continued his commentary throughout the dinner service. "Look at her trying to act all dignified," he said during the salad course, loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "This is the same woman who thinks criminals deserve better treatment than cops. Now she's pretending to care about sick kids for the photo op." The tension in the room was becoming palpable. Other guests were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering to their companions about the inappropriate behavior. The foundation's board members looked mortified. They'd worked for months to create an evening that would bring people together, and one guest was turning it into a political circus. When the foundation's CEO took the stage to introduce the evening's honorees, Trump Jr.'s table continued their disruptive commentary. As Crockett's name was called for her work on pediatric cancer funding, boos and catcalls came from his direction, drowning out the applause from the rest of the room. That's when things escalated beyond mere rudeness. As Crockett walked toward the stage to accept her recognition, Trump Jr. stood up from his table, swaying slightly from the alcohol, and began walking in her direction. His intent wasn't clear at first. Maybe he was heading to the bathroom. Maybe he wanted to network with someone near the stage. But as Crockett reached the podium and began her brief acceptance remarks, his purpose became obvious. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice cutting through her speech about the importance of federal research funding. "Excuse me, Congresswoman." The ballroom fell silent. Crockett paused mid-sentence, looking down at Trump Jr., who was now standing directly in front of the stage, close enough that she could smell the alcohol on his breath. "I think the people here deserve to know who they're really honoring tonight." He said his words slightly slurred, but his voice carrying the entitled aggression of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his behavior. Security guards began moving toward the stage, but they were positioned around the perimeter of the room and couldn't reach him quickly. The foundation's CEO started walking from the side of the stage, but Trump Jr. was already escalating. "This woman," he said, pointing up at Crockett, has voted against every pro-law enforcement bill in Congress. She thinks criminals deserve more rights than victims. And now you're giving her an award for caring about children. His voice was getting louder, more aggressive. What about the children who've been hurt by the criminals she's helped set free? What about the kids whose parents have been killed by illegal immigrants she wants to protect? The room was in shock. This wasn't political disagreement. This was a drunken man publicly attacking a congresswoman at a children's charity event. Several guests had pulled out their phones and were recording the confrontation. Crockett stood at the podium, maintaining her composure, despite being under attack. When Trump Jr. paused for breath, she leaned into the microphone. "Sir, this is neither the time nor the place for political discussion. This evening is about children fighting cancer, and I'd appreciate if you'd allow me to finish my remarks about the important work this foundation does." Her calm response seemed to infuriate him further. "Don't you dare lecture me about appropriate behavior." He shot back, his voice now loud enough to echo off the ballroom's walls. "You're the one who's inappropriate. You're the one who doesn't belong here." He took a step closer to the stage, close enough that Crockett could see the rage in his eyes. "You think because you've got some fancy title you can disrespect this country and then show up at events like this pretending to be respectable?" That's when he made his fatal mistake. Instead of staying on the floor level, he began climbing the steps toward the stage, his movements unsteady but his intent clear. He was going to confront Crockett physically. "You want to know what I think about you?" he said, now on the stage and walking toward the podium where she stood. "I think you're a disgrace to Congress, a disgrace to this country, and a disgrace to—" He never finished the sentence. Two security guards had finally reached the stage and grabbed him by both arms, stopping his advance just feet from where Crockett stood. But Trump Jr. wasn't going quietly. "Get your hands off me," he shouted, trying to pull away from the guards. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" The struggle was brief but intense. Trump Jr. continued shouting as the guards tried to escort him off the stage, his face red with alcohol and anger. "This is America. I have the right to speak. I have the right to call out these corrupt politicians." As they reached the steps, he broke free from one guard and spun around to face Crockett one more time. "You think you won something here? You think this makes you look good? Everyone in this room knows what you really are." That's when the head of security, a former NYPD detective named Marcus Rivera, stepped in. Rivera had been watching the situation develop and had called for backup from the plaza's security team. Now he positioned himself between Trump Jr. and the stage. "Sir, you need to leave immediately," Rivera said in the calm but authoritative tone of someone who dealt with thousands of drunk and disorderly situations. "You're disrupting a private event, and you're no longer welcome here." Trump Jr. tried to push past him. "I paid for my table. I have every right to be here. You can't throw me out for exercising my First Amendment rights." "Actually, we can," Rivera replied. "This is a private event on private property, and you're being asked to leave. You can go voluntarily, or we can escort you out. Your choice." The confrontation was now being filmed by dozens of phones, the footage already being uploaded to social media in real time. Trump Jr. seemed to realize that his situation was deteriorating rapidly, but his pride and alcohol consumption prevented him from making the smart choice to leave quietly. "This is harassment," he shouted loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear. "This is political persecution. They're trying to silence me because I'm telling the truth about this corrupt congresswoman." Rivera nodded to his team, and 4 additional security guards surrounded Trump Jr. "Sir, you're leaving now. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Trump Jr. made one last attempt to assert dominance. He pulled out his phone and began recording Rivera. "I'm documenting this assault on my constitutional rights. This is going straight to my lawyers and to every news outlet in the country." But his hands were shaking from alcohol, adrenaline, or both, and the phone slipped from his grip, clattering to the floor and cracking the screen. The sound seemed to deflate him, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he looked less like an entitled aggressor and more like a drunk man who'd gotten in over his head. The security team began moving him toward the exit, 1 guard on each arm and 2 more clearing a path through the tables. Trump Jr. continued his protests, but his voice was getting weaker, his resistance more token than genuine. "This isn't over," he called back toward the stage where Crockett still stood at the podium. Everyone's going to hear about this. Everyone's going to know how you had me thrown out for telling the truth." As they reached the ballroom's main entrance, Rivera delivered the final blow to Trump Jr.'s evening. "Sir, you're banned from this venue permanently. The Plaza Hotel will not host you for any future events, and we'll be sharing this information with other venues in the city." The doors closed behind them with a definitive thud, leaving the ballroom in stunned silence. Crockett remained at the podium throughout the entire confrontation, her composure never breaking, despite being verbally attacked and physically threatened. Now with Trump Jr. removed, she looked out at the audience of shocked faces and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for that disruption. As I was saying before we were interrupted, the work of this foundation represents the very best of what we can accomplish when we put children's welfare above political differences." Her voice was steady professional, showing no trace of the stress she just endured. "The researchers and doctors you're supporting tonight don't ask about a child's parents' political affiliations before providing treatment. They don't check voter registration before conducting clinical trials. They focus on what matters, saving lives and reducing suffering." She paused, looking around the room at faces that were beginning to relax. "That's the example we should all follow in this room and beyond. When we face challenges, whether it's childhood cancer or political disagreement, we should respond with dignity, facts, and a commitment to our shared values." The applause that followed was thunderous, a release of tension that had been building throughout the confrontation. People stood not just in appreciation for her words, but in admiration for how she'd handled an impossible situation. But the real impact was already spreading beyond the Plaza Hotel. Videos of the confrontation were going viral on every social media platform. The hashtag #NotSureTrumpsRemoved was trending within an hour. News outlets were already preparing stories about the incident. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Political figures from both parties condemned Trump Jr.'s behavior. Even some conservative commentators, who usually supported the Trump family, called his actions indefensible and embarrassing. The Children's Cancer Research Foundation issued a statement the next morning. "Last night's disruption was completely contrary to the values our organization represents. We are grateful to Representative Crockett for her grace under pressure and to our security team for their professional handling of the situation." More damaging for Trump Jr. was the response from New York's social scene. Within 48 hours, he'd been disinvited from 3 upcoming charity events. The Union Club suspended his guest privileges. Several restaurants in Manhattan quietly added him to their "do not serve" lists. The legal consequences were swift as well. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office announced they were reviewing video footage to determine if charges should be filed for harassment, trespassing, or disorderly conduct. While Trump Jr.'s lawyers would likely prevent serious legal consequences, the investigation alone was a public relations disaster. But perhaps most damaging was the impact on his business relationships. Several real estate deals he'd been negotiating fell through as partners distanced themselves from the controversy. His social media company lost 2 major advertising contracts. The Trump Organization's reputation, already damaged by various legal issues, took another significant hit. The contrast between the two figures couldn't have been starker. Crockett's calm professionalism under attack made her look presidential, while Trump Jr.'s drunken aggression made him look unstable and dangerous. Political commentators began using the incident as an example of the difference between serious public servants and political celebrities. 3 weeks after the gala, Trump Jr. attempted damage control with a series of interviews where he claimed he'd been set up and that his comments had been taken out of context. But the video evidence was too clear, and his explanations only made him look more desperate. The final humiliation came when Saturday Night Live devoted an entire sketch to the incident, with the actor playing Trump Jr. being repeatedly ejected from various charity events for increasingly ridiculous outbursts. The sketch went viral, cementing the incident as a cultural touchstone for entitled behavior and public accountability. 6 months later, Trump Jr.'s influence in New York society had evaporated. He'd moved most of his social activities to Florida, where the incident was viewed less harshly by some circles. But his reputation as someone who couldn't control himself in public had been permanently established. Crockett, meanwhile, saw her national profile rise significantly. The grace and dignity she'd shown under attack resonated with voters across the political spectrum. Her fundraising increased dramatically, and she was invited to speak at major events across the country. In her first major interview after the incident, she was asked how she'd managed to stay so calm under such aggressive attack. "I've been a public defender and a prosecutor," she said. "I've dealt with hostile witnesses, aggressive opposing counsel, and courtrooms full of tension. This was just another Tuesday for someone with my background." She paused. "But more importantly, I remembered why I was there. That event was about children fighting cancer, not about political theater. When someone tries to make everything about themselves, the best response is to keep the focus where it belongs." The interviewer asked if she felt vindicated by Trump Jr.'s social exile. "This was never about vindication," Crockett replied. "It was about maintaining basic standards of decency in public discourse. When someone crosses the line from political disagreement to personal attack, especially at an event meant to help sick children, there have to be consequences." The lesson was clear: in an age of social media and instant accountability, public behavior has public consequences. And when someone with real class confronts someone who's confused privilege with permission, the contrast becomes a teaching moment for the entire country. Donald Trump Jr. thought he could intimidate Jasmine Crockett at a charity event using alcohol-fueled aggression to publicly humiliate someone he saw as politically useful target. Instead, he destroyed his own reputation, got himself banned from Manhattan's social scene, and provided a perfect example of what happens when entitled behavior meets real consequences. His physical removal from the Plaza Hotel became a metaphor for his removal from respectable society, proof that even powerful family names can't protect you when your behavior becomes indefensible and your character is exposed for everyone to see.